Imagine for a second Deep Rock Galactic is a legendary Italian restaurant that is world-renowned for its culinary expertise. And the chefs know this, but after cooking Italian food for 8 years, they got tired of it. So the main chefs created a Mexican diner across the road. Now imagine you go into this Mexican restaurant, and it is again some of the best food you've ever had. But after finishing your meal, you're left with a confused feeling. Why does my burrito have pasta in it? Why are the tortillas pizza bases? And why do I feel like the lettuce has given me E. coli? Now obviously the food is still superb, but why are these Mexican meals so Italian? That tangent make any sense? Good, it shouldn't have, but this is how I feel about Rogue Core in its current state. Now let me get this out of the way quickly. Rogue Core is not a bad game, not by any means. It is essentially more Deep Rock, and I'm never going to complain about more Deep Rock. It's just as someone who plays a concerning amount of roguelikes, it's hard not to notice how underbaked the roguelike elements feel in Rogue Core, and how the core design pillars of Deep Rock Galactic clash with what I believe Ghost Ship wants Rogue Core to become. And yes, I know this game is still in closed alpha, but if there's any time to give criticism to a game, it's before it's made. In practically every roguelite or light, risk and reward are baked into the game's very DNA. You're constantly making decisions. Do I fight the extra strong enemy to get a boon? Do I spend longer in this level to risk the later levels becoming too difficult? Or do I just book it to the teleporter? Do I take away some of my health to maybe get a good upgrade? You take a risk and you gain something meanwhile in return. Rogue Core at the moment has very little of this. Except for risk vectors.
Charlie, I love
risk vectors. Risk vectors are one of the few places where Rogue Core implements roguelike design well. They work so well because they create meaningful decisions that will affect the rest of your run. Each risk vector may give you a reward which can vary from pretty shit to getting a stronger weapon, but they obviously come with pretty hard downsides to counteract this, whether it be putting the core spawn on Tren or making them invisible. There's a trade-off with real consequences. Risk vectors also in turn make each run feel slightly different, as the player has to adapt their playstyle to adapt to the new threat present. What makes these so great comes from the fact that once you choose a risk vector, it's locked in for the rest of the run. Having each risk vector stack also adds another level of decision, as the player has to work around each new risk vector and how they interact with the previously picked ones. The risk vectors may be a great implementation of a risk/reward system, but the rest of the game is sorely lacking in this department. The game is little risk and even worse reward. Maybe you could count losing ammo as a risk, but with the handily placed resupply cabinets at the start of every cave, really doesn't matter, and the reward? Plus 18 armor. Yes, there are some interesting upgrades, and yes, I will talk about artifacts later, but they are covered in just heaps of coleslaw. The game hands you all this coleslaw and says, don't worry, there's a candy bar under all that somewhere.
Fuck. Ugh. This was a horrible fucking idea. Like and subscribe.
Now, I'm not complaining about boring upgrades in general, as all games have those coleslaw upgrades. It's just Rogue Core's upgrades are just mostly coleslaw. Now, while I'm doing all this talk about coleslaw upgrades, I never expressly explained what I think these coleslaw upgrades mean, did I? Well, to explain it, I will show you this random Rogue Core run. In this run, I get 8 upgrades altogether, and out of these 8, 4 are stat upgrades. I call these stat upgrades / derivative upgrades coleslaw upgrades because they're not bad, they're just boring. Every roguelike has these upgrades, but then there's this bit of spice that changes them. For comparison, in a random, again, Risk of Rain 2 run, I got 29 unique upgrades, with 7 being stat upgrades. Yes, I'm not comparing apples to apples here, as upgrades are treated quite differently in Rogue Core and Risk of Rain 2, but again, I don't care. It's my video. Now obviously Rogue Core doesn't need to reinvent the wheel with upgrades, but it just needs a bit more spice. Oh, I fucking hate coleslaw. Oh yeah, where was I? Oh, there. Artifacts are Rogue Core's best attempt to create high-stakes choices outside of risk vectors, but at the same time, they can be so mundane. Some are just better upgrades and should just be moved to the upgrade pool, but the others are just run-defining. Some of my favorites are Glass Cannon, which lets you do insane damage, but reduces your HP to the point where a sneeze could kill you. Lightweight, which makes you faster depending how much equipment you're carrying, and Bastion, which turns you into a level 3 sentry. These upgrades are exactly the type of risk/reward design this game needs. Powerful upsides paired with a crippling downside. They completely change the way the game is played for that run, giving each individual run so much flavor, and in turn making the game more interesting. Artifacts should be treated by Ghost Ship like how they treat unstable overclocks, a benefit with a crippling downside that completely changes the way the gun is used. This is what Rogue Core needs, the candy bar under all that fucking coleslaw. Rogue Core's main feature is the timer, and on paper, the timer should be the heart of the game's identity. It's supposed to pressure the player to push you forward and make every decision feel more important. A constantly ticking clock can be one of the strongest tools to keep the stakes high in a roguelike, adding pressure and a sense of escalating danger. It forces you to balance exploration versus survival, greed versus speed, risk versus reward, but as of now, the timer isn't threatening in the slightest. I believe it just doesn't work as how the developers intended it to, as it clashes with DRG's core design pillars. Deep Rock is a slow-paced game. Even on Has 5, the game is not overly fast. Yes, Deep Rock has ways of going fast, and some game modes have shorter mission lengths on average, but in the moment-to-moment gameplay, DRG is slow. In Deep Rock, there is no need to go fast, and the game acknowledges this with gameplay elements that take time. You're actively encouraged to mine everything you see, explore side tunnels, clear rooms before moving on, and in turn you're rewarded for taking your time with all of these time-consuming activities by gaining XP at the end of a mission for enemies killed, materials mined, secondary objectives, seasonal events, etc. These core gameplay pillars, slow pacing, methodical exploration, thoroughness, completely clash with roguelikes. Roguelikes thrive on constant escalation pressure. Rogue Core tries to fuse these opposing design languages, and in trying to fuse them, Rogue Core muddies both of them. The slow, carefully DRG-style gameplay makes the roguelike timer feel pointless and toothless. Meanwhile, the timer's push for speed undermines the slow and thorough Deep Rock style of play. The game just ends up in a limbo where neither approach shines. Ghost Ship clearly wants Rogue Core to be a faster-paced game, a version of Deep Rock where the player is constantly weighing the pros and cons of going fast versus getting stronger, and you can see some early signs of this with the side objectives scattered around the map. All of these side objectives are long, and purposely so. They're designed to waste your time, whether it be the data terminal diagnostic, which forces you to click a button with a specific code, with all the codes looking somewhat similar, having to haul boxes onto a pressure plate, stand in 3 rings for a set amount of time, etc. On paper, they're meant to enforce a sense of risk of reward. The more time you spend, the greater the potential payoff, like revealing upgrade locations or obtaining an Expedite crystal. But because the timer itself isn't particularly threatening, the risk/reward tension falls apart. Instead of forcing meaningful decisions on the player's part, these side objectives end up rewarding you for effort without any real stake, which turns what should be stressful time managing objectives into low-risk busy work. Risk of Rain's main feature, much like Rogue Core, is a timer. In Risk of Rain 2, every second spent looking for the teleporter or spent farming enemies actively makes the game harder. This in turn incentivizes the player to play faster, spending as little time in the level as possible. But in doing this, your character can lose out on upgrades, which could be monumental later in the run. The player is constantly forced between a rock and a hard place. This is a great implementation of the timer as it helps with the risk/reward dichotomy of roguelikes, but Rogue Core's timer just falls short. Rogue Core is a game that constantly emphasizes speed during gameplay. Omega constantly tells you to speed up and get to the elevator now, and if you manage to miss that, even the dwarves constantly remind you to go fast. And you'd expect with Rogue Core's constantly reminding you to go fast that you'd be rewarded for going fast, right? No, it actually does the complete opposite, punishing you for going fast and rewarding you for going slow. The optimal way to play Rogue Core is to play slowly. If you blitz through a cave, you get rewarded with less Expedite, less upgrades, a weaker weapon, and a weaker ability. Completing a mission before the timer ends doesn't even reward the player with XP or anything. You're actually rewarded for the complete inverse, with Rogue Core having DRG's XP system ported over. But with all this talk of the timer kind of sucking, what happens when you spend too long in the cave and the timer runs out? Ooh, it's another swarm. Ooh. Well, it's not just a swarm. It was in previous alphas, but it also spawns these tentacle monster things, which are a great step in the right direction, as on first contact with them, they can seem genuinely terrifying, as they can grab you, leaving you completely defenses, acting almost like a cave leech of sorts. But after a while you realize they can be dealt with relative ease. And if you continue your stay in the cave, being the little loot goblin you are, your weapons and abilities progressively get stronger, which again reduces the tentacle monster's threat. All you lose by not continuing onto the next level is ammo and health. Two resources which, as previously established, can be replenished with ease. Now, all of this preamble is a problem, yes, but my biggest problem is even when the timer hits 0, the game never forces you to move. It doesn't get progressively harder to force the player to move on to the next level, even though Omega will try to convince you otherwise. There is no escalating danger, no increasing enemy density, no visible difficulty increase that makes you toss up the pros and cons of staying in the cave. There is nothing. You could continue collecting resources, there is no risk/reward. The timer serves as a pressure mechanic for the sake of having a pressure mechanic. Now, a game that Rogue Core should learn from is Spelunky. If you stay in a level for too long, the ghost appears. And unlike Rogue Core's timer, Spelunky's forces the player to move. The ghost is pretty simple. On contact with it, the player instantly dies. The moment you see that giant transparent bastard drifting onto your screen, you know one thing with absolute certainty. Your time in this cave is over. Leave now. But the ghost isn't a wall. You aren't immediately forced to leave the second the timer runs out. You can stay longer if you're skilled enough, but at a huge risk. You can get richer, but the odds of dying skyrocket. And then Spelunky goes even deeper with this risk/reward gameplay design. When the ghost appears, if the player is good enough and can move around the map effectively, they can lure the ghost to move over a gem of any kind, which turns the gem into a diamond. Spelunky's ghost may be an amazing timer on its own, but if you continue to chance your luck, the challenge gets harder, with the ghost splitting into two ghosts, behaving slightly differently, which in turn adds an escalating feel of danger, which in turn forces the player to move. And if you continue to fuck around, you will find out. With the ghost's escalating danger, Spelunky creates a feeling of pressure. Even with the timer being much smaller and harder to notice, you're always playing against the clock. Every decision matters. Every second matters. Now, I don't think anyone from Ghost Ship would see this video, but in the unlikely chance they do, this is how I would rectify all the problems in Rogue Core. Keep the current timer, but as the mission continues on, the swarms increase in amount and size, but if you do overstay your welcome, I'd add an escalating threat system. In stage 1, about 0 to 1 minutes overdue, the current testicle monsters spawn. In stage 2, I'd say about 1 minute to 1 minute 30, the tentacle creatures increase in number and are stronger. In stage 3, 1 minute 30 to 3 minutes maybe, a tentacle mini-boss thingy spawns. And in stage 4, if you stay for over 3 minutes, a ghost-like unkillable creature, which then forces movement, spawns. And as a reward for going fast, the player could get risk vectors with 2 upsides instead of 1, an artifact. If Ghost Ship Games was feeling extremely lazy, even bonus XP at the end of a mission would work. Move all the boring overclocks into the upgrade pool, and add more interesting upgrades, like plus 15% damage while airborne, reloading creates a shockwave, bugs you kill explode into AoE. They could just steal some of the level 5 upgrades from DRG as well. And while I'm at it, Ghost Ship could make the upgrades even more interesting by adding upgrade combos, which work by using 2 upgrades and giving them a unique effect. Like giving your weapon lightning bullets and combining it with a ricochet upgrade could have the chance to strike the enemy with a lightning strike. Just make more artifacts, I guess. And maybe in co-op runs there could be team artifacts that buff the whole squad, but add team-wide downsides. Okay, I'll just do these in a bullet round of sorts. Shorten caves, but increase the density, more enemies, tighter arenas, fewer long empty tunnels, improve run variety between levels, random events like DRG season events, mini-boss rooms, guaranteed artifact altars in deeper levels, optional high threat branches like in Slay the Spire. A good timer forces the player to make difficult choices, and a bad timer becomes a useless meter on the HUD, a pressure mechanic for the sake of having a pressure mechanic. Without escalating threat or meaningful consequences for lingering, every decision is no longer a gamble for your survival, and you're just wandering through a playground of mostly inconsequential rewards. That's why, even with the risk vectors and the artifacts doing good work, the core loop feels hollow. And that's where Rogue Core's biggest issue becomes impossible to ignore. The game continually insists it's fast-paced, but the systems underneath don't support that identity. And this is so frustrating to me, because Rogue Core isn't broken. It's a great game, whether it be in art direction, gameplay, music, SFX, or anything else in this package. It just feels like the game hasn't fully committed to what it wants to be. Deep Rock's slow-paced gameplay tears away from roguelike's faster gameplay. Roguelikes are about improvisation. Currently, Rogue Core tries to hold both identities at once, but instead of blending them, well, it dilutes both of them. You don't get the methodical satisfaction from clearing a cave in DRG, and you don't get the life and death tension from a roguelike. You get a diluted soup which doesn't improve on either game's taste. What Rogue Core needs is commitment. It needs to decide whether it wants to embrace the tension and chaos of a roguelike, or stick to the more measured approach of Deep Rock Galactic. Because until they commit to something, Rogue Core will remain a game that is trying to figure out what it needs to be. And that's just really frustrating to me, because it could just be such a great game. It just needs Ghost Ship to get their shit together and commit to something. And that is why I believe Rogue Core has an identity crisis. Like and subscribe. What?